The Fennelly report, the second Fennelly report, has been published in relation to the telephone recordings at Garda stations. And I must say, Taoiseach, that clearly it outlines that these recordings were unlawful, but I think it equally has to be said that the consequences of such unlawfulness was very significantly overestimated by the Attorney-General at the time. And I can well recall the meeting that you summoned myself and Deputy Adams to in relation to this issue, when essentially you were advising at that stage that the entire criminal justice system could break down, convictions would be overturned, and entire court proceedings would be rendered null and void. But more serious than that, it is very clear that the alarmist and overreactive response of the government forced the removal of a Garda Commissioner on that specific issue. The Secretary-General of the Department was sent out by you on a Monday evening to be told that the Cabinet could no longer have confidence in him and wouldn't be able to have confidence in him the following day, arising out of this particular issue. Notwithstanding the fact, as the report clearly confirms, the Commissioner was about the only person who acted appropriately on this specific issue as soon as he became aware of it. He insisted that the practice be stopped. He wrote to the Minister for Justice in relation to it. Now, the Attorney-General, Taoiseach, bypassed the then Minister for Justice and went straight to you to say the heavens were about to fall and that something needed to happen. Now, I think it's extraordinary that the Attorney-General would have bypassed the Minister for Justice in that context, and I would appreciate your views on the propriety of that, both constitutionally and generally, in terms of an Attorney-General not bringing such a matter to the attention of the then Minister for Justice and the government. It reveals a bizarre dysfunctionality at the heart of a government where the AG bypasses the Minister for Justice. And would you accept, Taoiseach, that the sending of the then Secretary-General out to the Commissioner to tell him that the Cabinet couldn't have expressed confidence in him arising from these issues was a wrong thing to do, essentially forcing his resignation on this issue? And do you accept, Taoiseach, that the failure of the Attorney-General to inform the then Minister for Justice about the telephone recording issue was wrong and not defensive, couldn't be defended? And what's your position on that? Also, Taoiseach, you know that the Attorney-General knew about this issue as far back as October 2013, but it was March by the time you had been informed. Clearly, the Attorney-General was alarmist and overreactive on this issue, and when you established the Commission, the Fennelly Commission, you made it clear that you wanted to restore competence and professionalism to the Garda Síochána. But in essence, the Garda Commissioner had to go. The Minister for Justice fell on his sword subsequently, but the Attorney-General has retained your confidence to the very end. Do you think that the actions of the Attorney-General in relation to this issue were proper and appropriate, Taoiseach?
Yes, I do. The comments made by Deputy Martin are quite extraordinary, that you attack an officer of the state who is not here to respond. The Attorney-General is advisor to the government. She became aware of matters that she could not have known about, nor did anybody else know the extent of them. These were quite serious matters, and she acted quite appropriately and properly in bringing them to the attention of the Taoiseach, myself. And in consideration of that, the first interim report of the Fennelly Commission on a sworn inquiry dealt with some of the matters that you've raised there. And that Fennelly report, the interim report, and I thank Mr Justice Fennelly for the work that he put into it, was very clear in its findings that I had no intention of forcing the resignation of the former Commissioner of the Gardaí, and that the former Commissioner of the Gardaí himself decided to retire. Now, the second element of the Fennelly Commission deals with what you raise in respect of the Attorney-General of our state, and she brought to my attention a very serious issue in respect of the unlawful taping of telephone calls to Garda stations. I am happy, and again I thank Mr Justice Fennelly for the work that he did here, because he does say in his findings that these were unlawful, that they were unconstitutional, that there was a lack of effective oversight and procedures within An Garda Síochána over a very lengthy period of time, and also in respect of the content of certain telephone calls relating to the investigation of the murder of Sophie Toscan du Plantier. These are the reasons, Deputy Martin, why the Attorney-General was quite justified in bringing the issue to my attention, and in which we were quite justified in putting together a commission of investigation to find out the answers to those questions. And I'm very glad to note that no case before the court or pending in the court was in any way compromised by this situation. But the findings are clear. The matter was unlawful, the matter was unconstitutional. It went on for a very great length of time, and it did not deal with the interfere with any case pending or before the courts. In respect of the second report of Fennelly, I was notified of this by the Fennelly Commission by the close of date on Friday at 6 p.m. As is my responsibility, I sent that to the Attorney-General and to her office for analysis and for examination. She reported to me in writing that it was in order to publish the Fennelly report, which I did within 12 to 14 hours, and which is part of the overall consideration now of the root and branch analysis of An Garda Síochána, which Government have agreed to do and decided to do, and wish to have the views of the opposition leaders and the opposition parties. And in respect of the findings of the second report of Fennelly, the Minister has decided to refer the report to the Policing Authority to oversee the implementation of the recommendations in the context of the oversight of An Garda Síochána, to examine the need for legislation in relation to the recording of calls, and to refer matters in the report relating to the Bailey case to GSOC to concise whether they believe that any further investigation is necessary against the background of the investigation that they've already been carrying out into this case. So the Attorney-General is quite justified in her actions.
Deputy Martin, we have 1 minute now, Deputy Martin.
The actual key questions that I put to you, and I would say to you straight up, Taoiseach, that you're about the only person that has that view in relation to the removal of the former Garda Commissioner. Irrespective of one's views on him, or whether one was pro or against, the bottom line is on this issue, he did everything appropriately. Yet you sent the Secretary-General out to his house in the middle of the night. Now, that doesn't happen normally, Taoiseach. And when a Commissioner happens to resign the following morning, that doesn't quite happen normally either, Taoiseach. Now, you managed to say with a straight face that you had nothing to do with it. But the bottom line is the context, the immediate context, was this phone recording controversy and crisis. And I recall well the meeting, Taoiseach, the only person that said that court cases could be overturned was you, at the meeting with myself and Deputy Adams, on the advice that you received from the Attorney-General. And that's actually the case. So the bottom line, Taoiseach, is I find it astonishing that you don't have some regrets and at least accept that the wrong things happened that evening, and that essentially a Garda Commissioner was removed, and that the law governing the removal of a Garda Commissioner was bypassed on that occasion, eventually leading to a resignation which covers all the technicalities. But in essence, Cabinet approval wasn't sought. The message was relayed that Cabinet couldn't have confidence, even though Cabinet wasn't consulted.
Thank you, Deputy.
That's not good constitutionally for the country. Things should be done in proper practice in a proper way. It didn't happen on that occasion, and the reason it didn't happen was because of a panicked, alarmist, overreactive response from you and the Attorney-General in relation to this. And you have failed to comment on the failure of the Attorney-General to actually talk to the Minister for Justice. Why won't you answer that question? Incredible.
I've already dealt with your question here. I asked the sole member, Mr Justice Fennelly, who was in charge of the Fennelly Commission, to deal in the first instance with two elements of what were considered important in the terms of reference. And he dealt with those. And the findings of that sworn inquiry are clear. And the finding of Mr Justice Fennelly was that the former Garda Commissioner decided to retire. In the second Fennelly report, the Attorney-General was quite justified in bringing to the attention of the public and to myself as Taoiseach of an extraordinary situation where hundreds of thousands of phone calls over a very long period were made to certain Garda stations and were recorded unlawfully. Who knows what would have been or what might have been in some of those phone calls? There was a woman murdered in West Cork, and in respect of phone calls made to a Garda station, this had a bearing on the setting up of a commission of investigation. And the Commission of Investigation is clear in its findings. 1, these phone calls were unlawful in being taped. 2, they were unconstitutional. And 3, they did not interfere at the end of the day with any case pending before the courts or with any case before the courts or pending the courts. This was not a case of, as you say, overreaction or panic. It was a very important element of the security of our state and confidence in the Gardaí. And as Mr Justice Fennelly has pointed out, over a very lengthy period, this happened in Garda stations around the country. It's now ended, and the situation arising from that means that the root and branch analysis of An Garda Síochána will take these matters into account, both with the policing authority, with GSOC, and the action that government will take in respect of any legislation that's necessary.